Go ahead and have a seat. So it was about 19 years ago. Emily and I were anticipating the birth of our first child. Nate was born on December the 27th. He'll be 19 here in a few days. We were praying he wouldn't come on Christmas. Christmas babies are great. They just mess everything up forever, right? Because then you got to do double duty, and close to Christmas is bad enough. But here was our challenge when Emily was pregnant with him, is that we didn't know what we were going to name that dude. Like we struggled to find a name for him, and it might have caused some discussions in the Helleman household on what to name him, and I didn't realize that there were a bunch of rules when it comes to naming kids. Like if you or your spouse has ever dated someone, that name is off the table, right? You can't name them something that someone you or your spouse dated. Like if you had a family friend who you didn't like, or a boss or a coworker you didn't like, that name is off the table. If there was a weird kid in school with that name, didn't matter if it was 30, 40 years ago, that was the weird kid in school. You can't name your kid that, and it's important what you name. If I did get to the point that I was just throwing out the craziest names that I could to try to convince Emily. So I spent over 2 weeks trying to convince Emily to name him Thor. Because I was just tired of names, so I'm like, Thor. And I actually had a list of reasons why Thor was the perfect name for our firstborn child. He's not named Thor. There's not a middle name Thor. I didn't win. But it just got to the point where it was. And in fact, I'll be honest, I went and looked up some names. These are real names that people really named their children. Like we can verify these. And so one was Anita Mann. I didn't do it. I'm just saying someone did it. Eileen Wright. Okay, yeah, think about it. Eileen Wright, not left, just right. Lois Price. That's just wrong, right? And then I got to be careful how I say this, and so you have to do it. Helen Back. I'll let you go over in your head that. You got to say it a few times. Some of y'all didn't quite get it there. Here's the deal, right? You've got to be careful what you name your kids, don't you? You don't want it to rhyme with something weird. You don't want it to be something weird. I pray none of you takes this list and goes, that's what I'm going to name one of my children. Don't do it, right? Because a name is important. A name is something you carry with you for your entire life. It's something that helps even define who you are and how you see yourself and how other people see you. And there's this cool little passage in the Old Testament, 700 years before the birth of Jesus. 700 years before Jesus was born, God shows up to this guy named Isaiah, and he says to Isaiah, I'm going to tell you about the coming Messiah. And most of, a majority of the Old Testament prophecies that we have about the coming Messiah come from the book of Isaiah, where God says, here's what you can expect, here's what you can look for, here's who he is going to be. And in Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6, God gives him some names, and really he says names, but maybe titles that tell us who Jesus is going to be. Let me read it for us here. It says, Isaiah chapter 9 verse 6, for to us a child is born, to us a son is given, and the government shall be upon his shoulders, and his name shall be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, and Prince of Peace. Now, we're going to spend the next few weeks as we approach Christmas looking at these names, looking at these titles that God gives and tells Isaiah, this is who Jesus is going, this is who the Messiah is going to be. And not that his name was literally Wonderful Counselor or Mighty God, Everlasting Father, or Prince of Peace, but these are titles, who Jesus is, and it's through this that we can discover who he is and the life that he wants for us. And so we're going to begin today simply by looking at this idea that Jesus is our wonderful counselor. That word wonderful in the Hebrew is the word pele, which means beyond understanding. It means too wonderful for words. It's when you're trying to describe something and you don't have words to describe it, and so you're doing your best to say, here's what I felt, here's what was going on, here's how amazing it was. But unless you've been there, it's hard to explain. The only example I can, or one of the examples I give is again, 19 years ago when I first held Nate, when we finally figured out that name, right? And I first held, and he's all slimy and nasty. I don't care what you say, newborn babies are weird. They're like lizards that are like just and like that. And and all of them are, even your precious baby, right? And I remember holding this slimy little thing going, that's wonderful. I didn't know how to describe it. I can't tell you the emotions and the feelings and all that was going on in me as I looked at my firstborn child. And I told some of you before that, like, one of the struggles I had when we found out we were having our second kid, right, was that, like, how am I going to love the second one as much as I love the first one? The second one might say I don't love her as much as I love the first one, but it's not true, because I remember holding her for the first time and going, that slimy lizard-looking thing is amazing. And it's wonderful. And the same with the third, because there's something that just is overwhelming. You don't have words to describe it. You can't explain it. And that's what he's saying when he's saying he's the wonderful counselor. He's saying, listen, that the God that we serve is just beyond words. We don't have a way to fully describe how amazing he is. He is the wonderful counselor. That word counselor is yoaz in the Hebrew, and it means to advise or consult or guide. It might be used to talk about a doctor, someone who helps you to get healthy. You're not healthy, you go to a doctor. He says, here's what you need to do to get healthy. It might be, we might even call it like a life coach, right? They didn't have life coaches back then, but they do now. And it's someone to sort of help you see who you are and how you need to get where you want to be. Or maybe it's a personal trainer who helps you in your fitness, or a coach or a music teacher who helps you learn something. It's someone who helps you get from where you are to where you need to be. So when he says he's the wonderful counselor, here's what he's saying. When God tells Isaiah that the coming Messiah, that Jesus will be our wonderful counselor, he's saying, remember, we serve a big God. Like a God beyond words, beyond description. Some of us, I've tried my whole life to describe how amazing the Father, the God, the Jesus, the Messiah that I serve is, and I just don't have words to describe him. He is all-knowing. Like think about that for a moment, that he knows everything that ever has been, like everything that has been, everything that's happening now, and everything that's going to happen for all of time, and he doesn't even have to struggle to remember it. Like, I forget my own children's names sometimes. I'm like, oh, which one are you? Number 3. Okay, whatever. Because it's like, my brain just forgets things that God never forgets, never struggles. He knows everything. He's not only that, he's all present, which means he's above and outside of time, outside of space, that he is present now, and he's present in the future, and he's present in the past, at all places, at all times, and always, that he's beyond these limits of time and space that we find ourselves in, that he is all powerful, right? And we're going to look at these even in more depth next week, because it's just amazing to think about. There is nothing that's impossible for God. All of our lives are defined by things we can't do, isn't it? Like, think about how much of our life is defined by the things that you and I cannot do. I can't run that fast. I can't do that. I can't remember that. I can't accomplish that. I can't. And we work around it and we try to do better, but there's always a limit to what we can do, and God has no limits. He's just beyond words. This is the God who spoke, and out of nothing came everything. He is beyond words, and that big God, that wonderful God, that all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present God, the King of kings and Lord of lords, cares about you and your life and wants to help you get from where you are to where you need to be. Isn't that amazing? Like, we talk about the bigness of God often. I do, because I think it's important we remember God's not a small God. He's a big God. But that big God knows you. Like, not about you, he knows you. He knows things about you that you don't even know about yourself. He loves you in ways you cannot even begin to understand. He cares about you. He wants the best for you. He is invested and involved in your life, that he is your wonderful Counselor. We see this play out one time in the New Testament when Jesus is here, and it's the beginning of his earthly ministry, and he's starting to call some men to be his disciples, right? He picks 12 and represents the 12 tribes of Israel and the new kingdom and all that God's going to do, and he's going to spend 3 years with these 12 guys, and then he's going to leave. The Spirit's going to come, and they're going to go take the gospel to the ends of the earth and lead others to do that. And so he's gathering these 12. They're going to be important, and he chooses, one of the 12 that he chooses is this guy named Matthew, and Matthew is a tax collector. And we talk about that often around here because, man, tax collectors were hated, despised by the Hebrew people. They hated them because of two reasons. They got rich off of taking advantage of people. If Rome says you owe me $1, they would take $2, keep $1 for themselves, and give $1 to Rome. And so they could make as much money as they wanted. They had the full force of the Roman army behind them. So they had all the power and could take advantage of people and became wealthy. That doesn't make you popular. Additionally, though, the fact that they worked for Rome meant that they were traitors. They were working for the enemy. They were working for the conquerors. And so when Jesus walks up to Matthew, when this, what they all thought of at that time was just as a prophet, he was so much more, that's what they thought of him as. And when this Jesus walks up and says to Matthew, hey Matthew, come and follow me, Matthew's probably looking around like, who are you talking to? You don't want me. I'm a tax collector. You don't want me, I'm despised. You don't want me, no one likes me. And Jesus says, no, I want you. You come and follow me. And the Bible says that Matthew just leaves it all. Like he just gets up, leaves money on the table, leaves all the books, leaves all the stuff, and just says, I'm done. I'm going to go follow Jesus. And before he leaves everything behind, he gathers a bunch of his friends, and he throws a party. He says, I need to introduce you to this Jesus guy because he's pretty wonderful. And he gathers them all together. Now, here's the thing. The people who hang out with tax collectors aren't good people. Right? They're not the religious type. They're not the ones who are involved in the God stuff. They're the other people because you know why? Because bad people tax collectors don't hang out with good people because good people don't want to be around tax collectors. And so in the book of Matthew, in the book of Luke, here's what it says. And the Pharisees and their scribes, the really good religious people, grumbled at his disciples, saying, why do you eat and drink with tax collectors and sinners? Jesus, you're supposed to be a prophet. Why are you hanging out with all of these sinful, broken, messed up people? And it says this, and Jesus answered them, those who are well have no need of a physician, but those who are sick, I have not come to call the righteous, but sinners to repentance. You know what's really cool? That word physician right there is the same root word for counselor. He's saying, I am here, not for people who think they've got it all together. I'm here for those that are messed up and broken and know it. I'm here for those that are hurting and sick and they're going, God, I can't fix my own life. I'm here, Jesus says, to bring healing to those who are sick. So I have a question for you today. Are you sick? Not. Please don't have COVID. Not that kind of sick, right? If you have that, stay home. That's the one rule we have. Just stay home. You can come whatever you want, but if you do we'll watch this online till you get better. But I'm asking you, are you sick? And maybe a better question is, what is your sickness? What is the thing that you struggle with that you know is true of your life and you try to hide it and you try to cover it up and you try to pretend like it's not that big of a deal, but you know in those moments of quietness by yourself that you just wish, say, God, is there some way I can overcome this? Is there some way that you can remove this from me and from my life? Maybe for some of you it's something like fear. Of always worried, of living in fear that what if I fail, and what if I'm not enough, and what if God doesn't love me, and what if I lose everything that I have? And so we allow fear to consume us and define our lives. What if for some of us it might be something like addiction, where we have those things that control us by like drugs or alcohol or pornography or shopping or media, or things that consume our life where there's no room for the things that really matter. Maybe for some it's loneliness. Yeah, we know people and people know us, but we don't feel like we're known. Like no one cares for us or loves us, and we're just all alone in our lives, and we feel like, God, I just wish someone would love me and know me. Maybe for some, it's feeling like our life has no meaning. Get up in the morning and we get ready and we go to work and we work all day and come home and eat dinner and watch something on the television and go to bed and do it again the next day. And maybe something exciting every now and then interrupts, so life just doesn't really have any meaning. And we're going, God, just why can't my life matter? Why can't it have meaning to it? And the list goes on and on and on of those things that we would say, God, could you remove this from me? God, could you change this? God, I feel like I'm a sinner. I feel like I'm sick. I feel like I'm broken and I need a physician. I am not well. Because I'm here to tell you that I love the fact that we live in a world where we have counselors to help us. I'll tell you, I've been to a counselor. I recommend counselors. I encourage you, if you need to go to one. It can be helpful, especially when you have someone who's godly, who loves Jesus and points you to Jesus and helps you see yourself and the issues that you have and maybe work through them and give you some practical things. But I also want to tell you that there is no better counselor for our life. There's no better guide. There's no better physician. There's no better help in our lives than the wonderful counselor. In fact, I will tell you that the wonderful counselor is here to heal. He's here to give you healing. The all-knowing, all-powerful, all-present God who cares about you, and he's saying, I'm here to help you, to guide you, to lead you, to help you move from sickness and brokenness to healing and life. So here's what I want to encourage you to do. 3 things. Seem pretty easy if I list them here, but going to be harder to do. Number 1 is to be honest. I said in the first service, I was about to say, all of us, and I can't say all of us, so let me just say I and other people I know, often we don't want to deal with our brokenness, do we? I mean, often we'd just rather hide it or cover it up or explain it away or act like it's no big deal. We're not hurting anyone, but we know that there's more to it there, and we know that there's value maybe in just learning to be honest with ourselves and with Jesus about our brokenness. There's a great example of this in John chapter 4. Jesus is at a well. And the disciples had gone into town, and he's just sitting there, and this Samaritan woman walks up, and he begins to have a conversation with this Samaritan woman, and he tells her some stuff about faith and some stuff about worship and the living water and all the stuff that, what it means to follow Jesus and why Jesus came. I think she understood about 10% of what he's saying, but at one point she says, hey, Jesus, I want what you're offering. I want it. And Jesus does something that's just really weird to me. He's saying, okay, you can have it, but first, go get your husband and let's talk together. And you're like, dude, Jesus, this woman's about to, she's about to become a follower of you. She's about to pray and give her life. I mean, this is like, you could baptize her right here and right now if you wanted to. Why are you telling her to go get her husband? And she says to him, well, I would, Jesus, but I don't have a husband. And look at what Jesus says. And Jesus said to her, you are right in saying, I have no husband, for you have had 5 husbands, and the one you now have is not your husband. So let me translate this for you. You've been married 5 times and you're living with the guy who's not your husband right now. That's why you say, I don't have a husband. And I don't know if the woman, I don't know what she was thinking, but it's got to be one of those shocking moments where she's like, how do you know this? Who have you been talking to? What's going on here? And you look at this and you wonder, why in the world would Jesus do this? And I think there's something Jesus wanted her to do, and it's just to learn that he knows her. Like, he knows the thing about her that she doesn't want other people to know. That's why she told us she didn't technically lie, but sort of a lie-ish, right? You don't have a husband because you've been divorced and you're married, living with someone you're not supposed to, and all of that. And so the reason she did is because she was ashamed of it. She was embarrassed by it. She knew that it wasn't right. She knew that what she was doing was wrong. She probably prayed, God, can I just have one good relationship in my life? And she hid from others. And Jesus goes, wait a minute. Let's take a moment and be honest. Let's take a moment and say that you've been looking for significance and healing and hope in a bunch of men who aren't giving it to you. Let's be honest about your sin and your struggles and your brokenness, not because Jesus didn't know. He proved that he knew, but because she needed to know. It's why that when she leaves and when this interaction is over, it says that she goes back to her town, to the city where she lived in, and she said, "Come see a man who told me all that I ever did. Can this be the Christ?" Like, come see this guy who knew the stuff about me that no one else knows, that I've been hiding, that I've been lying about. Come see him. He knows everything there is about me and what I think is implied in there, and he didn't reject me. He didn't turn his back on me. He didn't run away going, "Oh no, you're too unclean. You're too broken. You're too messed up for me." He said, "No, I know everything about you, and I'm still here to be the wonderful counselor, to give you hope and healing. I'm here for you." You know that just as Jesus knew her brokenness, he knows yours. You're never going to come to Jesus and say, "Jesus, here's what's going on in my life." And he goes, "Really? It doesn't work that way." And he doesn't need you to be honest so that he can know what's going on. Remember, he's all-knowing. He knows better than you do what's going on in your life. He doesn't need that. But you and I need to bring into light the struggles that we have so that we can find the healing that Jesus offers. That's why David said in the Psalms, "Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved." I love that word cast because it implies some things, right? To cast something, what do you have to do? You have to hold on to it, don't you? You have to pick it up and put it in your hands. You can't, I can't cast that thing while I'm standing here and it's right there, can I? Can't do it. It's impossible. No matter how hard I try, no matter how much I throw, if I don't hold on to it, I can't cast it. But casting also means that I take a hold of something and I intentionally throw it some other way, to some other place, to some other thing. And what the psalmist, what David is trying to say is, guys, what's your burden? What's your brokenness? What's the thing that you struggle with? Pick it up, be honest about it, and give it to Jesus. And don't just sort of like, just toss it. No, he says cast. Like cast means effort, right? Throw it with all that you have. Just here. Be careful, I'll throw that and hit somebody in the head here. Here it is, Jesus. Here it is. I've cast it on you. So some of us today need to learn to be honest with our Savior. To just say to him, "God, I'm broken." And not just generally. Like it's easy to say it generally. No, it's, "God, here is my brokenness. Here is my sin. Here is my struggle. Here is my hurt. Here is my pain. Here is what it is. God, I am casting it, giving it to you." But it doesn't just stop, I think, when we cast be honest with, cast our struggle, be honest with him. We also need to listen to his voice. There's a time where Jesus took 3 of his disciples. He took James and John and Peter up to this mountain. And on top of this mountain, he reveals his glory. We call it the Transfiguration. And really, it's a fancy word to mean that they got to see the heavenly Jesus without the body Jesus. Does that make sense? He removed himself from this physical body and showed them who he really was in all his glory. Walked around with Elijah and Moses, all kind of crazy stuff going on. They're like, "What is happening here?" They don't understand it. They don't get it. They just know we want to stay here because this is awesome. We are with Jesus in his like all of his glory, and we're going to enjoy this. And at the end of that time, here's what happens. It says in Mark 9:7, "And a cloud overshadowed them, and a voice came out of the clouds, 'This is my beloved Son.'" Right? I'm proud. This is Jesus. This is God in flesh. Listen to him. Listen to him. Guys, it's not enough to see Jesus. It's not enough to encounter Jesus. It's not enough to know about Jesus. We need to listen to him. If he is truly a wonderful counselor who only wants the best for us, then why would we not do everything that we can to hear and listen to what he is saying? And he's given us all these ways to do it, right? Like, he's given us his word. He worked through all of these people through all that time to pull this thing together so that we could know everything that we need to know about God, about who he is, about who we are, about what it means to be one of his children, about the life that's possible, about how to find hope and healing. And he gave it to us right here. He gives us the gift of worship where we get to come together and just sing and praise him and maybe let our brains for a moment stop focusing on the things of this world and just focus on him so that we can hear him. It's through prayer. It's through the teaching of others. It's through things like friends who talk to us. It's even through the circumstances of life. You know what it really boils down to? That we hear God when we stay close to God. That the closer we are to him, the more that we hear. And that's why Jesus said this. He says, my sheep hear my voice, and I know them, and they follow me. He's saying those that follow me, those that are my children, my sheep, those that are mine, he says they stay close to me, they hear my voice, they know me, and they follow me. Do you realize that that wonderful counselor is talking to you? Are you listening to him? We were talking just a couple of weeks ago about this weird thing called COVID that's happening, right? I don't know if y'all have heard of it. It's sort of dominating the news right now. I get it, but we were talking, and especially sort of back the first 13 weeks. Is for 13 weeks we did this completely virtual online church thing, which means I came here and I stood here in an empty room and preached. And it was the weirdest thing ever for me. I discovered I'm not supposed to be a televangelist. I'm not saying that's wrong for people. Like that's between them and God. But I actually like seeing your faces. I do. Believe it or not, I like looking at you, and I like talking with you. I like interacting, and I like the people part of ministry. It's who God's called me to be. I'm not saying God's called everyone, but I learned that really. And I'm going to tell you that after 13 weeks of doing that, I just wanted to be around people. In fact, it was only my children and a few of the worship team and some of their families that came, and they just came just to pretend to be interested in what I was saying. And I appreciate that about sort of like what you do, but just kidding. I know it's you do, but, and it was just hard. And I'm going to tell you about week 9, maybe week 10. I don't remember exactly. I was struggling, and I mean that I really was struggling. And I remember one night I was in my house. Emily was working, and I remember the prayer. I said, God, if this is what ministry is, I'm not sure I can keep going. There was depression going on, there was fear going on, there was all this stuff that was going on, and I was just, I was at the point where I'm like, God, I'm going to go sell shoes. I don't know if people sell shoes anymore, but I'm just going to, because I don't know if I can keep going. And I said, God, you got to help me keep going. And I promise you, this sounds like one of those made-up preacher stories, but I need you to trust me. It really happened. The moment I say that, my phone vibrates. I'm like, Jesus, okay, it wasn't Jesus texting me. That would have been amazing. But it was a friend who texted me. And he sent me a link to a video. It was Zach Williams and Dolly Parton. God spoke through Dolly Parton to me, which is just hurts my head to think about. Because they sang that song, and some of you have seen it, There Was Jesus. I hadn't heard it. It'd been out already, but I hadn't heard it, hadn't seen the video. And it's just them singing. It's a song about different people going through tough times and darkness and wondering they can go on. And just the chorus is, There Was Jesus. And I'm telling you, Jesus said in that moment, keep going. I'm here. So I got up and I kept going because he spoke to me. And I don't know if that freaks some of you Baptists out. It's okay. You'll get over it. But our King of Kings and Lord, that maybe someone would look at it and go, well, that's just a coincidence. And I know my God is bigger than that. Are you listening? Is bigger than that. Are you listening to him? Or are you so busy trying to solve it that you never take the time to say, God, what are you saying? So we be honest. We're honest. We listen to his voice. And here's the hardest part. We do what he tells you. We do what he tells you. See, it's one thing to be honest. God, here's my problems. It's another thing to say, God, okay, what do you want? And hear his voice. It's something different when we say, God, I'm going to do what you're telling me. But unfortunately, too often we do steps 1 and 2, and then we treat God's answer like it's a part of a Google search that we do, where we scroll down until we find the answer we like. We treat God's answer like it's just an option of one of 30 that we can choose from, like it's somewhere in the middle. Maybe it's at the top of the better answers, but there might be a better answer than what the wonderful counselor knows for us. And it's so silly when we say it that way, and yet we all do it all the time, where we say, God, here's what's going on, I need you, and we listen to his voice, and God says something through his word or through another person or through some circumstance, and then we go, yeah, I don't know if that's going to work for me. I've joked before that if I could be anything else, I'd probably be a weatherman, because if you're wrong, it's okay. Right? As long as you can look out a window and get that much right, you're good. Like, it's sunny today, I can probably tell you what the temperature is, but outside of that, if you're wrong, it's okay. And if you're a weatherman or have family that is, I'm not trying to insult them, you just can't predict it as well, and everyone's okay if the weatherman gets it wrong. A job I don't know if I could be is a doctor, because I'm going to tell you what would drive me nuts. If someone comes up to me and says, hey, here's my problem, and we diagnose the problem, and then we come up with the treatment, and then they go, I'm going to do the opposite of that. That would drive me nuts. My head would pop off all the time. And then especially when it gets worse, like the doctor says stop smoking, or maybe lose a few pounds, or maybe take this medicine, and we say, nah, we don't want to do that because we know better than you. And then you come back to me later and say, hey, guess what? This isn't working, doc. What's wrong? And I'm like, what's wrong? You didn't do what I told you to do, wingnut. And I might just say that, and that would get me fired, and it would just drive. It wouldn't end well, right, for me. And so here's the thing, but that's how we treat God. God says, look, God, here's what's going on. I need your help. Show me what to do. And God speaks to us, and we go, maybe later. I don't know, God, let me listen to some other people and see what they have to say. Let me sit and think on it, because I might be able to come up with a better answer than you do. There are things that God's going to tell you to do that are going to seem crazy. Things like, forgive that person. And your response is going to be, God, you don't know how much they hurt me. And if God were being honest with us, he'd say, you don't know how much you hurt me. And God's going to tell us to do things like serve someone. And we're going to say, but God, all they do is just take and take and take from me, and they never do anything back, and they just suck me dry. I can't serve them. And God goes, isn't that what you do to me? And God's going to say to us something like, you need to give of your time and of your resources to something bigger than yourself, something like God's kingdom and God's work. And you're going to say, but God, I'm so busy and I don't have enough, and I barely have enough to get by. And God's going to say to you, you have more than enough, because you have everything you need to do everything I've told you to do. So stop whining and do it. But we look at God and go, God, I'm hurting, and life ain't what I want it to be. And God tells us what to do, and we come up with all kinds of reasons why we can't. And when we do it, we miss out on the healing that our wonderful counselor is offering us. There's a story that I come back to. Man, I feel like I could preach on this story every week for a year, because it's that important. It's a story about a rich man who comes to Jesus, and he says, Jesus, what must I do to be saved? What must I do to be forgiven, in fact, is what he says. What must I do to find hope and healing? And Jesus says to him, all right, here's what you need to do, and look at what happens there. I'm going to read it to you real quick. Some of you are going to know the story, but Mark chapter 10, verse 20. He said to him, teacher, all these things have I kept. I've done all the commandments from my youth. And Jesus, looking at him, loved him. He loved him. His heart broke for this man. And he said to him, you lack one thing. Go and sell all that you have and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven, and come and follow me. In verse 21, and then it says, disheartened by the saying, he went away sorrowful, for he had great possessions. Now, sometimes we look at this story and we focus on the money part of it, and the money is the part of it, but that's not really the heart of the story. The heart of the story is that Jesus looked at this man who was controlled by things. who was controlled by stuff, who felt like if he could just have more and be more and become more powerful, then all of his needs would be met and he would feel whole and wonderful and life would be great. And Jesus is looking and going, none of those things are going to work. In fact, they're robbing you from the best things. If you'll let go of those things, I'll give you a treasure that lasts for all of eternity, something that's bigger and more majestic and more amazing than anything that this world has to offer. And the guy goes, take this temporary treasure over eternal treasure. And he felt that he knew better than Jesus, and he missed out on what God was offering because he wouldn't say yes. He wouldn't listen to the wonderful counselor who only wants the best for him. So here's my question for you today. It's simple. What is the wonderful counselor telling you to do? Not what's he telling your husband or wife to do. Not what's he telling your kids to do, your neighbor to do, your friend to do, the person sitting in front of you or behind you to do. What is he telling you to do? Here's my challenge for you this week. Ask God. Now, be honest with God about one area in your, not all of them, because you ain't got time for that this week, just one. Just one area in your life that you want to change, that you know is broken, that you know is sin. It's fear, it's judgment, it's addiction, it's whatever it is that you're struggling with. What is one area? And be honest with yourself. In fact, I want you to be so honest that you have the courage to write it down. Maybe take your 4G guide here and put it in the margin. I'm not going to make you turn it in. We're not going to come up here and like nail it to the wall or something weird like that. I just want you to take a moment and be honest with God about one thing that you're struggling with, one brokenness, one hurt, one pain, one difficulty in your life, and write it down. And then for 1 week, I want you to pray differently. I don't want you to ask God for anything for a week. Like, I know, like, what am I going to pray about? Like, that's all we do is ask God. God, help me here. God, bless me here. We throw in a little bit, your will be done kind of stuff just to make it sound spiritual. But really, it's just our list of things that we want. And God says to bring our list of things that we want to God. That's important. Bring your list to Him. Tell Him the things that you want. But I'm asking you to take 1 week where you don't ask God for anything other than to show you what to do. God, what do you want? God, what are you asking me? God, what are you saying to me? And every day pray that. Read in the Bible. Look, ask people to help you. God, what did God want me to do with this one area of brokenness, this one thing that's going on in my life? And that we spend a week listening to God, and then you do it. Because by the way, I'm pretty convinced that if we're seriously listening, God's going to tell us what to do. He's not a God who's in heaven like playing hide and seek with us. Okay, He wants you to know. He's the wonderful counselor who wants to tell you what to do. So if you want to have hope, if you want to have healing, if you want to have your brokenness be made whole, then listen to Him and do it. And what that may mean is that you need to say to someone else, okay, here's what God's telling me to do. Will you ask me every day until I do it? That's hard, isn't it? But what if? What if we started just once a week or once a month or every so often? God, here's what's going on. I'm going to pray until I hear what you want. And then I'm going to do it and I'm going to get help. Because I know that left to my own, I'll lie to myself. I know if left to my own, I'll talk myself out of it. And that's too extreme. That's not really what God wanted me to do. And maybe we just, this Christmas, enjoy the presents and the lights and the food and all that goes along with it. But maybe one of the things that we do is we let our wonderful counselor, the wonderful counselor, tell us what He wants us to do. And then we do it.